People always say time heals all wounds. Baby, time didn't heal mine. What healed mine was a 10-year-old girl standing on shaky legs in a cold courtroom pressing play on a cracked old tablet and blowing my whole life wide open. My name is Denise Harris. I'm 63 years old now. I got grandbabies who run through my little house tracking in dirt and joy, and most mornings I wake up to the smell of coffee and the sound of birds not shouting. Folks at church call me Miss Denise and bring me their peach cobblers to taste, ask me for recipes for prayers for advice. But it wasn't always like this. There was a time I could barely trust my own mind. A time I thought I was the problem. That I was the crazy one. That if I could just be a little quieter, a little neater, a little more grateful, everything would be fine. I used to believe that being a good wife meant shrinking myself smaller every day so he could feel big. I remember the day of the hearing like it's still happening in front of me. The air in that courtroom was so dry it hurt to breathe. My hands were shaking, my heart beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. My husband back then. Calvin sat there in his pressed suit tie, straight shoes shining like he was going to a job interview instead of trying to take my child. People behind us whispered, and I just knew they were talking about me. The unstable wife, the messy one, the one who couldn't cope. And my little girl, my Nia, was sitting on that hard wooden bench with her legs too short to touch the floor, swinging back and forth, clutching this old tablet with a big crack spidering across the screen. She held it like it was something holy. I didn't know yet that it was our lifeline. You ever been so scared you feel hollow, like somebody scooped you out and left just a shell sitting there? That's how I felt. Years of being told, you're overreacting. Denise, and you always forget things. Denise, and why do you make everything so difficult? Denise had worn me down to nothing. I didn't recognize myself anymore. And that's why I tell this story. Not because I enjoy going back there, I don't. But because I know there's somebody listening who's been called crazy so many times they've started to believe it. Somebody who keeps asking, is it me? Am I really this bad? If that's you, pull up a chair, baby. This one's for you. See, when you look at us now, me and Nia and her little girl giggling in my kitchen, you'd think we've always been this happy. We haven't. This peace was fought for. It was clawed back one hard truth at a time. Back then, I was just a woman in my 30s who thought she'd hit the jackpot. Calvin smiled at me like I was sunrise. He told me, I'll always take care of you, Denise. You'll never have to worry about a thing. And I believed him. I believed every soft, sweet word. I believed him so deeply that when he started saying different words, sharp ones, quiet ones, the kind that sink into your bones, I believed those too. You're so forgetful, baby. You'd lose your head if it wasn't attached. Lord, Denise, look at this mess. You've been home all day and the house still looks like a tornado went through. You're too emotional. That's why you don't handle the money. I'll keep us on track. Little digs, little jabs said with a laugh and a kiss on the forehead. Said in front of friends, in front of family, with everybody chuckling like it was a joke. And when a joke gets told enough times, people stop thinking it's a joke. They start thinking it's just the truth. After a while, so did I. So when we finally ended up sitting in that courtroom with his lawyer calling me disorganized and unstable, it wasn't brand new language. I'd already heard every word before, from him. I sat there on that stiff wooden chair, palms sweating, knees pressed together so they wouldn't shake, listening to strangers talk about my life like it was a file in a cabinet. Evidence, exhibits, statements. They had pictures. Oh, they had plenty of pictures. My kitchen on a bad day, toys all over the living room floor, a laundry basket half done. Little moments of real life frozen and twisted into proof that I was failing. They had reports too from a woman who was supposed to be helping our marriage, a church counselor. A woman I'd trusted. She'd written it down neat and professional. Denise reports feeling overwhelmed. Denise struggles to manage daily tasks. Denise exhibits emotional outbursts. All the things I'd said in tears hoping for help had been turned into bullets to shoot me with. And sitting right there in the middle of all that was my child. Nia kept clutching that tablet like it was the only solid thing in the room. Every now and then she'd look at me, big brown eyes wide and scared, then look at her dad like she was trying to break herself in half to love us both. That look still haunts me sometimes when the house is quiet. If you've never stood in front of a judge while someone calmly explains why you shouldn't be trusted with your own baby, I hope you never do. There's a shame that wraps around you like barbed wire. I wanted to scream, that's not who I am. I'm more than those photos. I'm more than one bad day. But all that came out was this thin, tired little voice. The voice of a woman who didn't fully believe herself anymore. Years of being told, you're exaggerating, Denise will do that to you. You start thinking, maybe I am. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I am too much, too messy, too loud, too sensitive, too everything. I remember staring at the judge's face, trying to read it like scripture. Was he buying what Calvin's lawyer was selling? Did he see a crazy woman in front of him? Or did he see a tired mother just trying to hold on to her child? My lawyer leaned over and whispered, "It doesn't look good, Denise." And my heart dropped straight through the floor. That's when I glanced over at Nia again. She met my eyes, and for the first time that day, she looked like she'd made up her mind about something. Her little chin lifted just a bit. Her hands stopped shaking around that tablet. I didn't know it yet, but my baby girl was about to do something brave, something that would change everything for both of us. People tell me now, "You're so strong, Miss Denise. I don't know how you did it." And I smile, but the truth is, I wasn't strong that day. I was broken and tired and ready to give up. The strength came from a 10-year-old who refused to let the lies win. Before we get to that part, before we get to the moment she stood up and pressed play, you need to understand how a woman like me ended up in that courtroom believing she might actually deserve to lose. Because nobody starts out that way. You don't walk down the aisle in a white dress thinking, "One day this man is going to destroy my confidence and try to take my baby." No. You walk down the aisle thinking, "This is safety. This is home." So if you're listening to me now with that familiar knot in your stomach, wondering if you're overreacting, wondering if you're the crazy one, I want you to hear me. I've been there. I've sat where you're sitting. I've believed the lies. And I lived to tell what happened when the truth finally got its turn. That truth didn't come from a preacher or a therapist or a grown man in a suit. It came from a little black girl with braids and scuffed school shoes, holding a cracked old tablet like a shield. I'll tell you how we got there. But to do that, I've got to go back to the start, to the woman I used to be before the gaslighting, before the reports, before the courtroom. Back to the days when Calvin's smile felt like sunshine, and I still thought love meant never ever doubting him. Back then, Calvin really did feel like sunshine. I met him on one of those sticky summer evenings that make your clothes cling and your patience short. I was working the late shift at the grocery store, tired down to my bones, just trying to get through my last hour without snapping at anybody. He came through my line with a basket full of odds and ends, frozen dinners, laundry, detergent, flowers. I remember those flowers like it was yesterday. Yellow roses. My mama used to say yellow roses meant friendship, not romance, but the way he smiled when he handed them to me, it felt like both. "You look like you could use these more than whoever I was going to give them to," he said, leaning on the cart like he had all the time in the world. I laughed more out of surprise than anything. "Oh, you had somebody in mind already?" I asked. He shrugged. "Not anymore." That was Calvin. Easy. Charming. He looked me right in the eye when he talked, like he was really seeing me, not just some tired cashier in a faded uniform. He asked my name, then said it back to me slow like he was tasting it. "Denise." He told me he'd just passed his real estate exam, that he was about to take this whole city by storm. I thought it sounded cocky, but he made it seem funny, like a joke we could both be in on. When my shift ended, he was waiting outside with those same yellow roses wrapped up in store paper. "I figured you might not be allowed to keep 'em behind the register," he said, "so I came to deliver 'em properly. I should have been suspicious, I guess. A man that smooth. But when you're young and tired and life's been mostly hard sweetness, feels like a miracle." We stood there in that parking lot, the hum of the streetlights above us, and talked like we'd known each other longer than that one evening. By the time he walked me to my small apartment, he knew about my mama's heart condition, my dream of going back to school, how I loved to cook but hated doing dishes. I knew about his big plans, his rough childhood, the way he never wanted his family to struggle the way he did. He called me the next day, and the next, and then every day after that. It didn't take long before he knew my schedule better than I did. He'd show up with lunch on my break or be waiting with the car running when I clocked out late, like he'd been reading my mind. "Can't have my girl walking home alone at night," he'd say, opening the passenger door with a little bow. My girl. It had a nice ring to it. Nobody had claimed me like that in a long time. We got married about a year later. Nothing fancy church, a borrowed dress, a cake. My sister baked in her little kitchen. But the way Calvin cried when he saw me walking down the aisle made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. He held my hand so tight at the altar I thought he'd never let go. "I'm going to take care of you, Denise," he whispered as the pastor prayed over us. "You won't have to struggle like your mama did. You hear me?" And he did take care of things, at least at first. He worked hard, hustling houses, shaking hands, going to networking events. I still worked at the store for a while, but one day he took my hands across the kitchen table, that serious look on his face. "Baby, we want kids, right?" he said. "Yeah," I nodded. "We talked about it in that dreamy someday way couples do. Well, with my schedule picking up and you working all these hours." "When are we supposed to build a family?" He squeezed my fingers. "I'm making enough now. You don't have to keep killing yourself at that store. Let me handle the money. You focus on the home, on us, on our babies." It sounded like an offer, but it sat in his voice like a decision. I didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to look ungrateful, so I quit. Everybody at work signed a little card and said they were happy for me. "You got yourself a good man," they told me. I thought so too. Those first months at home weren't bad. I liked waking up without an alarm clock, taking my time with breakfast. I'd cook Calvin big meals, fried chicken and collard greens, macaroni and cheese, sweet tea so sugary you could feel your teeth hum. He'd walk in from work, kiss my cheek and say, "My queen done cooked up a feast again." I'd beam like a child with a gold star. When I got pregnant with Nia, he was over the moon. He talked to my belly every night, telling her about all the schools he wanted her to go to, all the places he'd take her. "Daddy's little princess," he'd say, his voice soft in the dark. The day she was born, he cried harder than I did. He held her so carefully, like she was made of glass, and promised again, "I'll always take care of you, both of you." Looking back, I can see the shift. But when you're living inside it, change comes as quiet as a draft under a door. It started small. One morning, I left a pot soaking in the sink overnight. I was exhausted. Nia had been up half the night with colic. When Calvin came into the kitchen, he just stood there staring at the sink. "You didn't finish the dishes?" he asked. "I was going to do 'em this morning," I said quickly, already reaching for the sponge. Nia was fussy and everybody's tired. "Denise," he cut in, his voice still calm but sharp. "I work all day to keep this roof over our heads. Dishes ain't that hard." I bit my tongue, finished them before I'd even had my coffee. He kissed my forehead on his way out the door and said, "Try to stay on top of things, okay?" Like we were just having a normal conversation. Like it was reasonable. After that, he started handling all the bills. At first, it made sense. "I'm good with numbers," he said, laughing. "You hate math. This is me loving you, baby." He switched our checking account to one with just his name for business reasons, he said, but he gave me a card and told me to use it whenever I needed. Then, little rules started to appear. "Call me before you spend over $50, he'd say. "Just so I can keep track. I'm trying to budget. Don't buy brand name diapers. The store brand is fine. You know how much money you're wasting. We don't need you going out to lunch with those girls from your old job. They're a bad influence. They just want to complain about their men all day." On their own, none of those things sounded evil. It wasn't like he was screaming or hitting me. He'd say everything with that same calm, reasonable tone. And if I bristled up, he'd sigh and say, "See, this is what I mean. You get so defensive. I'm just trying to help. It's hard to argue with somebody who insists they're helping." He started keeping little tallies of my mistakes. "You left the milk out again, Denise. Remember last week? You do this all the time. You're so forgetful. You double booked the pediatrician and the plumber. How many times do I have to tell you to write things down? You burned the chicken. You've been home all day. What are you doing with your time?" After a while, I started answering like a naughty child. "I'm sorry. I'll do better." That was his favorite line to hear. Church made it worse in a way. We found a congregation with a lively choir and a friendly pastor. Calvin fit in fast, joined the men's group, volunteered to help with the building fund. Everybody loved him. They'd pat me on the arm and say, "You got you a godly man, Denise. You're blessed." On Sundays, Calvin would slide his arm around my shoulders and smile that golden smile. He'd stand up during testimony time and say how thankful he was for my beautiful wife at home, raising our daughter, keeping our house in order so I can go out and provide. I'd sit there in my best dress feeling proud, and also like I was on display, like I had to live up to the version of me he was selling. It was around then he started calling himself the head of the household more often. "It's my job to make the hard calls," he'd say when I disagreed with something. "You're too emotional about it. Let me lead. That's what a man does." Sometimes when I pressed back, his voice would drop lower. "You know, Denise, you never had much stability growing up. That's why you're so anxious. That's why you need someone like me to keep things steady. I get it. But you gotta trust me. And what do you say to that?" He wasn't entirely wrong. My upbringing had been chaotic, money short, mama sick. I wanted stability so badly, I clung to the idea that he was the one who could give it to me. So when he said, "Let me take care of the money," I said, "Okay." When he said, "Let me decide how we raise Nia," I said, Okay, when he said, "Don't worry your pretty little head about that," I told myself it was love, not control. There were good days mixed in too. That's what makes it confusing. There were days he'd come in with a new dress he'd picked out for me, saw this and thought of you. Days he'd dance with Nia in the living room, spinning her around until she squealed. Nights he'd bring home my favorite peach pie from the bakery and say, "My girls deserve something sweet." You hold on to those days like proof everything is fine. You tell yourself the other days are just stress, a rough patch. You tell yourself he wouldn't be so critical if you just tried harder. So I tried. Lord, I tried. I made charts and lists and schedules. I set alarms on my phone for appointments. I scrubbed the baseboards before he got home so the house would smell like bleach and pine sol. I double-checked the mail before he saw it, terrified there'd be a bill I'd forgotten about, something he could wave in my face. And still he found things. There was always something out of place. A toy left on the stairs. A stain on a shirt that didn't fully come out. A late notice on a bill he'd forgotten to pay, but somehow that too became my fault. "You should have reminded me," he'd say. "You know how busy I am. I can't do everything, Denise." So now I was responsible for the things I wasn't allowed to control. When I'd get overwhelmed and snap just a little, just a raised voice or a tearful, "I'm doing the best I can." He'd lean back, fold his arms, and look at me, like I'd just proved his point. "See? This is what I mean. You can't handle stress. You go from 0 to 100. It's not normal, Denise. It's not healthy. And when you hear not normal enough, you start to wonder what normal even is. If you'd walked into our home on a random Sunday afternoon, you might have seen a pretty picture. A family at the table saying grace over fried chicken, our daughter laughing, my husband smiling. You might have thought, now that right there is a solid Black family. That's goals. You wouldn't have seen the tightness in my chest every time Calvin's eyes swept the table, scanning for something out of place. You wouldn't have heard the little voice in my head going, "Did I forget anything? Did I do it right? Is tonight going to be one of the good nights or one of the nights?" You definitely wouldn't have seen the bank statements because those never passed through my hands. At the time, I didn't have the words gaslighting or coercive control. All I knew was that somehow, in a house I cleaned with a child I raised in a life I was living, I felt like a guest on probation. And every time I started to feel that something was off, Calvin had a way of wrapping his words around my doubts like a rope. "You're just stressed, baby. New moms get like this. You're imagining things. Nobody's judging you but you. You always make me out to be the bad guy. Why do you do that?" That's the thing about a slow storm. You don't notice how hard it's raining until you look up and realize you can't see the sky anymore. Back then, I couldn't see it at all. All I could see was Calvin, the man who promised to take care of me, and me failing over and over again to be the woman he said he needed. If I had known where that path was leading, how it would end with him parading my worst moments in front of a judge, maybe I would have started fighting back sooner. But I didn't know. All I knew was that something inside me was getting smaller, quieter, sadder, and that one day it would get so small I'd barely be able to hear my own voice at all. That's when he told me I needed help. Not him, me. "That's when you should talk to someone," Calvin said one night, like we were just chatting about the weather. We were in bed, lights off, Nia asleep down the hall. I'd had another one of those days where everything felt like too much. Garbage truck missed our bin. Nia spilled juice on the couch. The washing machine made a weird noise. Little things stacked up like bricks on my chest. I'd cried in the bathroom with the water running, trying not to let the sound carry. Calvin slid in beside me, smelling like cologne in the cool evening air. At first he rubbed my back in slow circles, warm and gentle. Then he said it. "You should talk to somebody, Denise. A professional. You've been so emotional lately." I sniffed. "I'm just tired." "You're always tired," he answered softly. "You cry over little things. You forget stuff. You get overwhelmed by everyday life. That's not normal, baby." There it was again. Not normal. He kissed my shoulder. "It's not your fault. You didn't grow up with stability. You never learned how to manage stress right. But we can fix it. I know someone." "Who?" I asked, staring into the dark. "Dr. Simone," he said. "She's a counselor at the church. Helps couples, helps women. Real godly woman. She can help you calm down, get balanced again." Notice he didn't say help us. He said help you. I rolled the name around in my head. I'd seen Dr. Simone at church. Tall, elegant, always in a pressed suit, hair laid just right. People whispered about how many marriages she'd saved. I'd assumed she worked for some clinic or hospital too, the way folks spoke her name like a title. "I don't know," I murmured. "Counseling costs money, Calvin." I'll take care of it," he cut in. "Don't you worry about that. I already talked to her. She agreed to see us." "Well, see you." He corrected himself smooth as butter. I'll come to a couple sessions if that makes you feel better. He'd already talked to her. I should have paused there. Asked why he was talking about me being unstable with a stranger before he talked to me. But when somebody has spent years convincing you that you're the one who's off, you don't lean on your own judgment much. So we went. The first time I stepped into Dr. Simone's office, I felt small. Her space was neat color-coordinated books lined up just so. A little cross hung on the wall over a framed degree. She smiled like someone used to being admired. "Denise," she said, standing up to shake my hand. Her voice was warm but practiced. "Calvin has told me so much about you. Please sit." Right away, that rubbed me wrong, but I sat anyway. Calvin sat next to me, ankle crossed over his knee, like he was in a business meeting. He looked comfortable. Too comfortable. So Simone began folding her hands. "Your husband tells me you've been feeling overwhelmed." I let out a tiny laugh. "Well, I mean, we have a little girl in the house and—" "It's more than that," Calvin said, cutting in with a gentle sigh. "She forgets things all the time. Bills, appointments, stuff on the stove. She cries a lot. Sometimes she yells. I'm worried about her." He said it like a man confessing his worries to a doctor about a beloved patient. His eyes even got shiny like he might tear up. I stared at him shocked. Was I really that bad? Simone tilted her head. "How long has this been going on?" "A while," he said. "But it's getting worse." "Denise," she turned to me, all professional empathy. "How does that sound to you? Do you feel like things are getting worse?" I opened my mouth to say, "No, that's not right." But then images flashed, the burned chicken I'd thrown out the appointment. I'd forgotten the night I snapped and slammed a cabinet door so hard it rattled. My cheeks burned. I guess I whispered. "I mean, I've been stressed. I feel like I can't keep up sometimes." "There it is," Calvin murmured, touching my knee softly. "I just want you to get help, baby. I don't want you to struggle." Simone wrote something down on her pad. That scratching sound still rings in my ears when I think about it. "That must be hard," she said to me. "To feel like you can't keep up. To feel overwhelmed." She nodded like she understood. "Tell me about your childhood, Denise. Did you have a lot of chaos growing up?" And there it was, the shift from something is off in this marriage to something is wrong with you. I talked. "That's what you do in those rooms." I told her about my mama's heart failing, about the times the lights got cut off when I was little, about how I'd promised myself my family would never live like that. I told her about the nights I lay awake worrying about money, even when Calvin said he had it handled. Every time I brought up something Calvin did, how he criticized how he controlled the bank accounts, Simone would tilt her head and reframe it. "Is it possible," she'd ask, "that Calvin is just trying to provide structure? Given what you've been through, maybe you're extra sensitive to feeling controlled." Extra sensitive, emotional, overwhelmed. She wrote it all down. Calvin would chime in every now and then with a gentle example. Like the other day, he'd say, "I just asked if she'd remembered to pay the water bill, and she snapped at me like I'd called her stupid." "I never called you stupid, did I, baby?" He'd look at me, eyes all hurt and honest. "No," I'd mumble. "You didn't." "I think you're projecting old wounds onto present situations," Simone would say. "Calvin isn't your father, Denise. He's not the man who hurt you. He's your covering." Your covering. That's church talk for head of the household dressed up in scripture. I walked out of those first few sessions feeling wrung out and vaguely ashamed. Simone would shake my hand at the end and say, "We're making progress. You're very self-aware, Denise. That's good." Then she'd turn to Calvin and add, "You're a patient man. She's blessed to have you." He'd nod humbly like he wasn't eating that praise up. Eventually, Calvin stopped going. "I think it's better if y'all talk one-on-one," he said. "I don't want to influence what you say. This is your healing, Denise." So it was just me and Simone. I thought she was helping. I did. She gave me breathing exercises, Bible verses about a gentle and quiet spirit, told me to journal when I felt angry instead of raising my voice. We spent a lot of time on my triggers, rarely on his behavior. Every time I left, I felt a little more convinced that I was the broken piece in the puzzle. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have guessed, was that while she was asking me to unpack my childhood, she was also building a neat little case file on me. One that didn't say woman trying her best in a controlling marriage. One that said emotionally unstable, overwhelmed, disorganized. A diagnosis without the name. Around the same time, Calvin's behavior at home shifted again. He started documenting. I'd catch him standing in the doorway of the kitchen, phone in his hand. "What are you doing?" I'd ask, half laughing. "Just taking a picture," he'd say. Little everyday moments. The first time it was the sink piled with dishes and Nia in her high chair smearing peas across her tray while I mopped up spilled juice from the floor. I looked frazzled hair coming out of my scarf shirt stained. I look a mess, I protested. Don't take pictures of me like that, he laughed. Relax, Denise. It's just real life. Click. Another time I was in the middle of sorting laundry. I like to dump everything on the couch and separate piles dark light Nia's clothes. The living room looked wild for about an hour until I finished. Calvin walked in right in the middle of the chaos. Wow, he said low whistle. Did a bomb go off in here? I'm doing laundry, I snapped. You know I always click. There you go, getting defensive again, he muttered. I can't say nothing without you jumping down my throat. It didn't occur to me then that he was building a visual story, one where I was always surrounded by mess, always in the middle of chaos. He started recording our arguments too. It took me a while to realize that's what he was doing. We'd be fighting over something, me asking why the bank account was lower than usual, him telling me not to worry, and I'd notice his phone on the counter screen on camera facing us. One night I picked it up mid-argument. The recording icon glowed in the corner. Are you taping me? I asked, stunned. He rolled his eyes. I was recording myself for affirmations, he said smoothly. Trying that mindset stuff Simone talked about. Look at you always assuming the worst of me. He deleted the video with a flourish right in front of me. At least he made it look like he did. I wanted to believe him so badly I didn't dig deeper. But Nia noticed more than I thought. Kids do. She'd be sitting on the stairs with her doll watching us, watching him. He never raised his voice much, not with her in the room. He didn't have to. His power was in how calm he stayed while I unraveled. Sometimes he'd kneel down beside her afterwards and say loud enough for me to hear, Mommy just gets overwhelmed. Okay, it's not your fault. Daddy's here to keep things steady. He was writing the story of who I was in her little mind, the overwhelmed one, the unstable one, the one who needed to be managed. The thing about a story told often enough is it starts to sound like truth. The real crack in the facade came the day I saw him and Simone standing too close in the church parking lot. Service had just ended. The choir had sung everybody into a good mood. Kids were running around with little cups of juice. Older women were hugging necks and trading recipes. I'd stayed behind to help in the kitchen, rinsing out pans from the fellowship meal. When I finally stepped outside, squinting in the afternoon sun, I saw them across the lot, Calvin and Simone. They were by her car, his hand on her elbow in that familiar, possessive way he used to touch me when we were still dating. They were laughing about something I couldn't hear. For a moment, his hand slid down her arm a little too slow. My stomach went cold. I watched Simone look around, check to see who might be looking. That was what told me it wasn't innocent. It wasn't just church folks talking. Later that night, I brought it up. I saw you talking to Simone after service, I said, trying to sound casual. Y'all seemed close. He didn't even look up from his phone. She's our counselor, Denise. We were talking about you. See how suspicious you get. This is what I mean. You always think the worst. My face burned. She's our counselor, I repeated. Shouldn't she be talking to both of us? Not just you in the parking lot? He sighed and finally put his phone down. Irritation plain on his face. You want help or not, she's trying to figure out the best way to support you, and you twist it into some scandal. This is exactly the paranoia she was talking about. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Paranoia. Another new word to add to the list of what was supposedly wrong with me. After he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table alone, staring at my own hands. There was a little chip in my nail polish. The clock ticked loud on the wall. I thought about how many people at church trusted Simone, called her a blessing, about how everybody adored Calvin. What if I was wrong? What if I was just jealous? That's the cruelty of gaslighting. Even your own instincts start to feel like strangers you're not sure you can trust. I didn't know it then, but while I was losing faith in myself, he and Simone were busy turning all my fears and confessions into paperwork, into notes that would one day be stapled neatly together and handed to a judge as professional opinion. Denise struggles with organization. Denise reports frequent mood swings. Denise appears easily overwhelmed by routine tasks. They never wrote down, Denise is trying to keep her head above water while her husband keeps moving the shore. Meanwhile, Calvin's little pictures of real life in those so-called affirmation videos were being saved, not deleted. Cropped. Edited. My worst moments trimmed out of context and tucked away like bullets in a gun he hadn't fired yet. The first time I got a glimpse of what he was doing was on a random Tuesday, the kind of boring middle-of-the-week day you don't think your life can change on. I was at the dining table with a stack of mail. One envelope was addressed to Calvin Harris-esque, from a law office downtown. My heart did a little jitter. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm honest enough to tell it I opened it. Inside was a formal letter confirming his initial meeting with a divorce attorney. For the purpose of discussing custody and property division, it said. Custody. Property. The room started spinning. When he came home that night, I confronted him, letter shaking in my hand. "What is this?" I demanded. "You went to a lawyer behind my back. You're talking about custody." He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. "You went through my mail." He shot back. "That's a federal offense, Denise." "Don't you dare change the subject on me," I cried. "You're trying to take my child, my home." He snatched the letter from my fingers. "I'm trying to protect my daughter," he snapped. "Somebody has to think about her long term. You're unstable, Denise. We both know it. Simone has said as much. If this marriage ends, I need to make sure Nia is safe. Safe. From me." I took a step back like he'd hit me. "I'm her mother," I whispered. "And I'm her father," he shot back. "The one who keeps things running while you fall apart over burnt chicken." I don't remember everything I said after that. I know I yelled. I know I cried. I know I told him he was cruel, that he was twisting things. I know my voice rose loud enough for the neighbors to hear. What I didn't know was that his phone sitting on the counter was recording every second. Only it didn't catch the part where he told me he'd been consulting a lawyer. It caught the part where I was red-faced and sobbing, saying things I barely meant in my hurt. Nia stood in the hallway, clutching her stuffed rabbit eyes wide and terrified. When I saw her, my heart shattered. Calvin walked over, stepped around me like I was a piece of furniture, and crouched down to her level. "See what I mean, baby," he said, voice soft and broken. "Mommy can't control herself sometimes. That's why Daddy has to make some hard decisions." She looked from him to me, confusion written all over her little face. And in that moment, I saw exactly what he wanted her to see: him calm and reasonable, me wild and out of control. I wanted to scream, "This isn't fair," but who would I scream it to? The house. The walls. Later that night, when the house was quiet and Calvin was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up just enough for me to see the preview. It was a text from Simone. "How did it go with the lawyer?" it said. "Remember, the more evidence of her instability, the better. Judges always favor the more stable parent." My blood ran cold. Evidence. Instability. Better. For the first time, the fog in my brain cleared just enough for the shape of something ugly to form. This wasn't just a rough patch. It wasn't just him being critical. This was a plan. I didn't have time to think. Footsteps patted down the hall, Nia in her pajamas, eyes still puffy from crying earlier. "Mommy," she whispered, "can I sleep with you?" I locked my eyes on her sweet face, on those little braids I'd done that afternoon, and something shifted inside me. A thin, sharp line of determination cut through the fear. I scooped her up into my arms. "You can always sleep with me, baby," I whispered into her hair. Always. She didn't know it yet, and neither did I. But that little girl, the one whose head was resting on my chest, listening to my heart pound fast, would be the one to blow their whole scheme apart. Because while Calvin and Simone were busy stitching together a story to bury me, they forgot one thing. Children see more than you think, and sometimes the smallest witness holds the loudest truth. I wish I could tell you that seeing that text from Simone snapped me awake for good, that I marched into that bathroom, yanked back the shower curtain, and threw both of them out of my life on the spot. But that's not how it went. What actually happened was, I froze. I tucked the phone back exactly where it had been, heart pounding like a drum, and spent the rest of the night with my mind racing in tight little circles. Maybe I misread it. Maybe evidence meant something else. Maybe Simone was just speaking generally. By the time Calvin climbed into bed smelling like soap and steam, I talked myself into a shaky kind of denial. I lay there stiff while he wrapped an arm around my waist. "You okay?" he murmured. I wanted to say no. I am not okay. "I saw your little conspiracy text. I know you've been planning." Instead, I whispered, "Just tired." He kissed the back of my neck. "You always are," he said softly, like it was a sad fact about me, not something he'd helped create. The next few weeks were a blur of almost normal. The same routines, the same criticisms, the same counseling sessions where Simone asked how I was managing my emotions and rarely asked how Calvin was managing his. But underneath it all, something new had started growing, a seed of dread that sprouted in tiny, jagged ways. I noticed him keeping his phone closer like it was a second skin. I noticed the little smirk he'd hide when I got flustered like he was watching a script play out. I noticed Simone seemed extra careful around me at church, too bright, too sweet, like she was overcompensating. And I noticed Nia watching. Always watching. She was 10 by then. Big enough to tie her own shoes, small enough that her feet still swung when she sat at the table. She had this way of tilting her head when adults talked, brow furrowed like she was trying to solve a math problem nobody had given her the numbers for. One afternoon I found her at the kitchen table with our old tablet, the one Calvin had bought years ago on sale. The screen had a big crack across one corner where she'd dropped it once, but it still worked fine for cartoons and homework. Her face was pale eyes glued to the glass. "Nia, baby. You okay?" I asked, wiping my hands on a dish towel. She jumped like I'd scared her. "I was just using this," she stammered, hugging it closer to her chest. I smiled. "I can see that. What are you watching?" She hesitated, then tapped the power button screen going black. "Just YouTube," she muttered. I almost pushed. There was something in her eyes I didn't like, something too old for 10 years. But then Calvin's car pulled into the driveway, and everything in me shifted back into survival mode. "Go put it up, baby," I said quietly. "Daddy's home." She slid off the chair and scurried to her room tablet clutched tight. Later that night, when I was folding laundry in her doorway, I saw it again. She had the tablet, propped on her knees, earbuds in. Her eyes were shiny, and every now and then she'd pause the video, squint at the screen, then press play again. "Nia," I said softly, "what are you looking at?" She jumped again quickly, locking the screen and pulling out one earbud. "Nothing. Just stuff." "Don't tell me nothing with tears in your eyes," I said gently, setting the laundry basket down. "Do I look like I was born yesterday?" She bit her lip hard, like she was trying to keep the words from spilling out. Then she whispered, "If I show you, you have to promise you won't tell Daddy I was on his phone." My stomach dropped. "On his phone," I repeated. She nodded, holding out the tablet like an offering. He left it on the couch, and it was open already. I saw your name. I wanted to see if he was saying something nice about you for once. For once. That tiny phrase cut deeper than any knife. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice calm, even though my heart was doing backflips. "Show me." She tapped the screen and pulled up a video. The shaky footage started in our living room, angled toward the coffee table. Calvin's phone lay there, screen lit, a long thread of messages visible. You could see his name at the top and under it. Simone's. The camera zoomed in jittery, like the hands holding it were small and scared. "You kind of have to pause it to read," Nia mumbled, sniffing. "'Cause my hands were shaking." I pressed my lips together to keep from crying. "You filmed this?" She nodded. I hit pause where the camera had focused. There it was, their conversation clear as day. "Simone judges like structure. Her being emotional works in your favor. Keep documenting. Calvin. Trust me, I am. House kid, everything will be secure once the court sees what I deal with. Simone, good. Once you have full custody, you'll both be free. We can talk next steps then." My vision blurred. I blinked hard, forcing the letters to stay in focus. There were more messages, little jabs disguised as concern. "Simone, how did her episode go last night?" "Calvin, perfect. Cried over some burnt food again. Got it on video. Simone, save it. All of it helps build the narrative." The narrative. That's what I was to them. A story they were crafting. I shoved the tablet back in Nia's hands for a second, afraid I might drop it. "How long have you known about this?" I asked, my voice thin. "I saw some texts a few days ago," she whispered, "but I thought maybe I didn't understand. Then I saw him meet her after school yesterday. I followed them." "I'm sorry, Mommy. I know I wasn't supposed to, but I followed them where I cut in, though I already had a bad feeling." "The coffee shop by church," she whispered. They were laughing, and I heard Daddy say, he said, tears spilled over. He said, "Once Denise looks crazy in court, it's a done deal." She wiped her face angrily like she hated the tears. So I hid behind the bushes and I started recording. 'Cause I thought, if I could show somebody, maybe they'd believe you. 'Cause nobody ever believes you when you say he's mean. I took the tablet back with shaking hands. The video shifted from the messages to an outside shot through the smudged window of a coffee shop. Calvin and Simone sat at a table, cups between them. The audio was muffled, but you could hear enough. "Already talked to the lawyer," Calvin was saying. "He says with the documentation and your report it shouldn't be hard. Judges don't like chaos." Simone stirred her coffee slowly. "You don't feel guilty?" she asked lightly. "About making the mother of your child look unstable?" He smirked. "I'm not making her anything. I'm just showing what she already is." They both laughed. I felt like the air had been punched out of me. For a second the world went quiet, just me and my heartbeat roaring in my ears. Mommy Nia whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" I looked at my baby, my brave, terrified baby sitting there with that old cracked tablet in her lap like a shield. "No," I said, voice breaking. "You did something you shouldn't have had to do, but you didn't do wrong." I pulled her into my arms and held on as tight as I could, not sure if I was keeping her from falling apart or myself. "Why are they doing this?" she cried into my shirt. "Why does Daddy want to make you look bad? Why does that lady help him?" I stroked her hair, tears sliding down my own cheeks. "Because some grown-ups care more about winning than about doing right," I said quietly. "Because when a man like your father decides he wants control, he'll use anybody who lets him. And the judge will believe them," she hiccuped. "Not if we have this," I whispered, glancing at the tablet. "Not if we're careful." In that moment, something inside me finally snapped into place. That seed of dread that had been growing turned into a hard, clear resolve. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I'd been hunted. And now, thanks to a little girl who refused to sit quietly and watch it happen, I had proof. People think the decision to leave happens in one big moment, a suitcase thrown into the trunk, a dramatic exit. But for me, it happened over 100 tiny moments, like beads slipping off a broken string. The night after Naya showed me the video, I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to Calvin breathe beside me, wondering how many lies could fit inside one man. When the sun came up, I got dressed the way you do for something serious but secret. Plain clothes, nothing flashy. I told Calvin I was going to the grocery store. Instead, I went to see a lawyer. His office was in a tired brick building downtown, squeezed between a bail bonds place and a pawn shop. The waiting room smelled like old coffee and nervous sweat. I sat there clutching my purse like it was my last lifeline, the tablet tucked deep inside. When they finally called my name, the lawyer, Mr. Cooper, shook my hand and motioned for me to sit. "What can I help you with, Ms. Harris?" he asked. My throat felt tight. I think my husband is planning to divorce me and take my daughter," I said. "And I think he's setting me up to look crazy." He didn't flinch, just opened a yellow legal pad. "All right," he said. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about Calvin controlling the money, about the counseling sessions that turned into character studies on my instability, about the pictures and the videos, the letter from the other law office, the text from Simone, and finally, with shaking hands, I pulled out the tablet and showed him what Nia had recorded. He leaned forward, squinting at the screen, then sat back slowly. "Well," he said, "that's substantial." "Will it be enough?" I asked, voice small. "To keep him from taking Nia, to keep us in our house." He rubbed his jaw. "It definitely helps," he said. "But I won't lie to you, Ms. Harris. Your husband looks good on paper. Solid job, active in the community, involved father. And you've been in counseling where there are notes about you being overwhelmed and disorganized." "Those notes ain't the whole truth," I protested. "They don't say what he's doing to me." "I believe you," he said, holding up a hand. "But judges like paperwork, reports, records. He's been building his case. We're late to this game, but not out of it." Late to the game. The words stung, but they were true. While I'd been busy blaming myself, Calvin had been busy gathering ammo. "What do?" I asked. "You document," he said simply. "You stop going to sessions with that counselor. She's compromised. You keep that video safe. You let me request all the records from her office, and you prepare yourself because if this goes to court, it's going to get ugly." "Ugly," I echoed. He nodded. "He's going to paint you as unstable, emotional, maybe even dangerous. He'll use every outburst, every tear, every burned dinner if he can find a way." My cheeks flamed. "Sometimes I do get loud," I admitted. "Sometimes I slam doors. Sometimes you react like a human being under pressure," he finished for me. "That doesn't make you unfit. But he's counting on you believing it does." That hit me right in the center of my chest. "He always says the judge will see I can't handle regular life," I whispered. That they'll see Nia's better with him. Mr. Cooper's eyes softened. Do you believe that he asked? I thought about late nights with Nia asleep on my lap, about school projects I'd helped her with, about the way she still reached for my hand in parking lots. I thought about her telling me I wanted to see if he was saying something nice about you for once. No, I said, voice steadier than I felt. I don't. Good, he said. You're going to need to hold on to that. Because he spent years convincing you you're the problem. Court will be his big chance to try and make that official. We talked paperwork, logistics fees. I didn't know how I'd pay. By the time I left, my head was spinning, but I had one thing: I hadn't walked in with a plan. When I got home, Calvin was at the kitchen table laptop, open, some spreadsheet pulled up. He barely glanced up. Get everything at the store, he asked. Yeah, I said, heart pounding. Got what we need. He smirked. Good. I was starting to think you couldn't handle a simple shopping list. The old me would have rushed to prove myself, to show him receipts, to apologize for ever making him think otherwise. This me just set the bags down and said nothing. Over the next few days, I moved quiet. I made copies of important papers and hid them at my sister's house. I started keeping a journal, not the kind Simone had told me to keep, where I dissected my overreactions, but one where I wrote down specific things Calvin said and did. Dates, times, witnesses, and I watched Nia. She was jumpier now, eyes always flicking between me and Calvin, like she was keeping score. One evening after he'd left for a late showing that I no longer believed in, we sat on the couch with the TV on low. Mommy, she said. Yeah, baby, are we going to have to go to court? She asked, fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. Like on TV with a judge and everything. My heart clenched. Why you ask that? Daddy was on the phone, she said slowly. He thought I couldn't hear, but I could. He said something about full custody and how you'd fall apart on the stand. I closed my eyes for a second. He was confident. Too confident. We might have to, I said honestly. I'd promised myself I wouldn't lie to her. But if we do, we're going to tell the truth. All of it. And we've got something on our side he doesn't know about. She glanced toward her room where the tablet was hidden under her pillow. The video, she whispered. The video, I confirmed. And you saw things, you heard things. Fear flashed across her face. Will I have to talk? She asked. Like, to the judge, in front of Daddy, I swallowed. Maybe. I don't know for sure yet. But listen to me. I turned her chin so she looked straight at me. You don't have to say anything you don't want to. And if you do, it'll be the truth. Not like what they're doing. She nodded slowly, but I could see the weight settling on her little shoulders. That's the part nobody talks about when they glorify fighting for your kids. Sometimes the fighting means your kids have to pick up weapons they should never have to touch. A week later, Calvin dropped the final pretense. He came into the living room with a manila envelope in his hand and papers stacked inside. We need to talk, he said. I set down the dish towel I was holding. About what? He laid the envelope on the table like he was setting down a contract. I filed for divorce, he said. My lawyer will be in touch with the details. We can do this the easy way if you don't fight me on custody. My ears rang. The easy way, I repeated. You mean I just hand you my child and walk away? I'm not saying you'll never see her, he replied smoothly. You can have visitation, holidays, but day to day. She'll be better off with me. You know that. He slid a stack of papers out, printouts of photos, snippets of Simone's reports, maybe even transcripts of our recorded arguments. I couldn't look too closely. My vision was blurring with rage. You've been documenting my worst days for years, I said, my voice low. And you call that what's best for her? He shrugged. I call it being responsible. Judges like stability. You're emotional, Denise. You've said it yourself in counseling. I said I was overwhelmed, I snapped. Because you keep moving the goalposts, Calvin. Because you keep telling me I'm failing no matter how hard I try. He smiled, a small satisfied curve of his mouth that I'd never noticed before. And now he said softly, I get to show a judge exactly what I've been dealing with. Or, we keep it simple. You sign these, agree to my terms, and I'll make sure you get to see Nia regularly. You won't have to go through the embarrassment of all this coming out in court. Embarrassment. That's what he called it. Not betrayal. Not abuse. Embarrassment. For a brief, ugly second, I thought about taking the pen. About signing whatever he wanted if it meant I didn't have to sit in a courtroom and listen to strangers debate whether I was fit to love my own child. Then I pictured Nia crouched behind a bush with that tablet hands shaking while she recorded her father and Simone laughing about making me look crazy. I pictured her little face when she asked, "Did I do something wrong?" and something inside me stood up. "No," I said quietly. "I won't sign." His eyes narrowed. "Think carefully, Denise. You really want all this aired out in front of a judge? You want to get up on that stand and melt down in front of everybody? You think that's going to help you?" I met his gaze for the first time in a long time without looking away. "I think the truth's going to help me more than your lies," I said. "You're not the only one with evidence, Calvin." For the first time I saw it a flicker, the tiniest crack in his confidence. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," I said, picking up the envelope and tucking it back inside, "I'll see you in court." "With my lawyer?" His jaw tightened. "You can't afford a lawyer." "You let me worry about what I can afford," I shot back. He stared at me, waiting for me to back down. When I didn't, his face hardened. "Fine," he said. "We'll do it your way. Just remember," he tapped the stack of papers, "I've got facts. I've got reports. I've got proof." "You do," I said. "So do I." He didn't know it yet, but his biggest mistake wasn't underestimating me. It was underestimating the little girl who'd been silently collecting the kind of proof no grown man wants played on a screen in front of a judge. Because the day he walked into that courtroom armed with his papers and his polished stories, he thought he was the only one who'd prepared. He had no idea that the quietest voice in the room was about to be the one that brought his whole narrative crashing down. Court days have a way of making you feel small no matter how grown you are. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. There were new lines around my eyes, new gray hairs at my temples. My hands shook when I tried to fasten my earrings. "You don't have to go." The scared part of me whispered, "You could still back down. You could still sign." But then I thought about Nia tiptoeing through the house, keeping secrets she was too young to carry. I thought about her crouched with that tablet whispering, "Maybe if I show somebody, they'll believe you." So I took a deep breath, steadied my hands, and finished getting dressed. Mr. Cooper met me outside the courthouse. He looked the same as always, slightly rumpled suit, tired eyes, coffee in hand. But that morning he had a certain sharpness about him, like a man who'd been sharpening his tools. "You holding up?" he asked. "I'm here," I said. "That's something, right?" "That's everything," he replied. "Listen to me, Ms. Harris. Calvin's side is going to go hard today. He's been building this show a long time. They're going to paint you as unstable, emotional. We're going to let them talk, and when they think they've won..." He glanced at the file under his arm and then at the old tablet in my hand. "We'll talk." My stomach flipped. "You sure the judge will even watch it?" I asked, clutching the tablet tighter. He nodded, a recording of him and the counselor planning to manipulate the court. A child witness with first-hand experience. No judge in his right mind ignores that. I let out the breath I'd been holding. "Okay." We walked through the metal detectors, down the echoing halls, and into the courtroom. The air was cool and smelled faintly of old paper and anxiety. Rows of benches creaked as people sat. A big seal hung on the wall behind the judge's bench, all official and heavy. Calvin was already there. He stood near his attorney, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine, spread crisp suit polished, shoes wedding ring conspicuously absent. When he saw me, his mouth curved into a practiced frown, the kind meant to say, "Look how sad I am this is happening." Behind him sat a few people from church. I recognized Simone sitting straight-backed in a navy suit, hair smoothed down, face serene. She gave me a small nod like this was just another counseling session, like she wasn't about to testify against me. Heat rushed to my face, but I sat down quietly at our table. A few minutes later, Naya slipped onto the bench behind me with my sister. She wore a simple dress and her good shoes. Her braids were freshly done beads clicking softly when she moved. In her lap, half hidden by her hands, was that old tablet with the cracked screen. I turned slightly. "You okay, baby?" I whispered. She nodded, eyes wide. "I'm scared," she mouthed. "Me too," I mouthed back. "But we've got truth. Remember that." The judge came in and everybody stood, then sat. Formal words were spoken, case numbers, names, the phrase, "custody of minor child," that made my heart twist every time I heard it. Calvin's attorney went first. He stood up, straightened his tie, and started talking about a father's concern, about how Calvin was a stable provider, a pillar of the community. A man reluctantly forced to seek custody because of his wife's increasingly erratic behavior. They introduced documents, the counseling notes from Simone printed and highlighted. Phrases jumped out at me from across the room. Overwhelmed. Difficulty managing daily tasks. emotional outbursts in front of the child. They displayed photos on a small screen, my kitchen on a bad day, that mountain of laundry toys scattered across the floor, my face, mid-argument mouth, open eyes wild. Freeze frames of frustration with all the context peeled away. Ms. Harris appears unable to maintain a stable home environment, the attorney said smoothly. Our client has taken every possible step to support her, encouraging counseling, managing finances, providing structure. But at a certain point, the child's well-being must come first. Simone took the stand next. She swore to tell the truth, and all that then folded her hands neatly. Dr. Brooks, Calvin's lawyer, began. How long have you been seeing Ms. Harris? She smiled in that professional way. About 18 months, and in that time, what has been your clinical impression of her functioning? She talked about my history of instability, about my emotional reactivity, about how I struggled to handle daily stressors. She said it kindly, like she was concerned, like she was being objective. Based on your observations, the lawyer asked, would you say Mr. Harris provides a more stable environment for the child? Yes, she said without hesitation. In my professional opinion, he does. It felt like someone had taken the story of my life and ripped out all the pages where I was doing the best I could. Then it was my turn. Ms. Harris, Calvin's attorney, said, pacing slowly. Isn't it true that you've described yourself as overwhelmed many times, as I said? My voice sounded small in that big room. I've been overwhelmed. Being a mother, being constantly criticized, being shut out of finances. It's a lot. He pounced. So you admit you're not handling things well? I admit I'm human, I replied quietly. I admit I've been under stress. I don't admit that I'm unfit. He showed the photos one by one, asking, is this your living room? Is this your kitchen? Would you say this is an appropriate environment for a child? Those pictures were taken in the middle of chores, I said, in the middle of life. You don't take a photograph halfway through baking a cake and call it a disaster. It's a process. A few people in the courtroom shifted. The attorney's jaw tightened. He played a clip of me raising my voice, cherry-picked from some long-ago argument. My words, stripped of context, echoed through the room. I winced at the sound of my own anger. Is this you? He asked. Yeah. Do you think it's appropriate to speak that way in a home with a child present? I swallowed hard. No, I said, I don't. And I've apologized to my daughter for every time I let my frustration spill over like that. But this clip doesn't show why I was upset. It doesn't show what was said to me before the camera turned on. The judge watched me closely. So did Calvin, arms folded, expression carefully neutral. By the time Calvin's lawyer was done with me, I felt scraped raw. Every shortcoming, every bad moment paraded out like a circus. Mr. Cooper did what he could on redirect. He asked me about the nights up with fevers, the homework projects, the lunches packed, the songs sung, the scraped knees kissed. He asked me about the bank accounts I wasn't allowed to see, the way Calvin controlled every penny, the way he'd mocked my mistakes instead of helping. But I don't have paperwork for those things, I admitted. Just memories. Just the way it felt. Sometimes, Mr. Cooper said quietly, looking at the judge. The most dangerous abuse leaves no bruise and no paper trail. It just leaves a woman doubting her own mind. When he finished, the judge called for a short recess. I stumbled out into the hallway, breathing like I'd run a marathon. My sister wrapped an arm around my shoulders. They're making you look bad, she whispered. They're twisting everything. I know, I said hoarsely, but it's almost time. Mr. Cooper came over, face set. He thinks he's got this sewn up, he murmured. He doesn't know we brought scissors. I looked around. Where's Nia? My sister stepped aside. Nia was sitting on a bench tablet in her lap. Hands clenched so tight around it, her knuckles were white. You still okay to do this? Mr. Cooper asked her, gently crouching to her level. We don't have to put you on the stand if you don't want to. She looked from him to me, then down at the tablet. When she raised her head again, there was something new in her eyes. Not just fear, determination. Daddy tells everybody you're crazy, she whispered. If I don't say what I saw, then he wins. My throat closed up. You shouldn't have to fix this, I said, crouching beside them. This is not your mess to clean up. She shrugged one small shoulder. It's our life, she said. I don't want to live with somebody who lies. Mr. Cooper nodded slowly. If you're willing, he said, we can show the judge what you recorded, and you can tell him why you did it. Just the truth. That's all. Nia took a deep breath that seemed way too big for her little body. Okay, she said. I'll do it. When we went back into the courtroom, everything felt tighter. The benches seemed closer together, the ceilings lower. Calvin shot me a smug look like it was already over. Mr. Cooper stood. Your Honor, he said, before we conclude, the respondent would like to present newly discovered evidence and call a final witness. Calvin's lawyer scoffed. We've already heard from Ms. Harris, he said. Are we going to drag this out further with speculation? The witness is the minor child, Mr. Cooper replied calmly. She has first-hand knowledge of the petitioner's conduct and of communications between the petitioner and a supposed neutral counselor. And we have a video. A ripple of interest moved through the room. The judge raised his eyebrows. Approach, he said, motioning both attorneys forward. They argued in low voices I couldn't quite make out. I caught fragments prejudicial best interests of the child pattern of manipulation. Finally, the judge leaned back. Given the seriousness of the allegations and the potential relevance of the recording, he said, I will allow it. But I will not tolerate badgering a child. Understood. Both attorneys nodded. Nia Harris to the stand, Mr. Cooper said. I watched my baby walk down that long aisle alone, her feet making soft tap-tap sounds on the floor, beads clicking with each step. She climbed up onto the witness stand, looking impossibly small in the big chair. The bailiff had to lower the mic for her. Do you swear to tell the truth? The clerk asked gently. Nia glanced at me. I smiled through my tears and nodded. Yes, ma'am, she said. Mr. Cooper started soft. Nia, he said, do you know why you're here today? She nodded. 'Cause Daddy wants me to live with him and Mommy wants me to live with her, she said bluntly. Unless they make me choose something else. A sad little murmur went through the courtroom. And do you love both your parents? He asked. Yes, she said immediately. I love both of them. Do you feel like you have to pick who you love? She shook her head hard. No, I just want things to be fair. He nodded. Fair is important, he said. Now can you tell the judge what you saw on your father's phone a little while ago? She swallowed, hands twisting in her lap. I saw him texting Miss Simone, she said. They were talking about Mommy. They were talking about making her look. She frowned, searching for the word. Unstable. How did that make you feel? He asked. Scared, she whispered. 'Cause Mommy already thinks everybody believes she's crazy, and they were trying to make it worse. Did you do anything when you saw those messages? Mr. Cooper asked. She nodded. I used my tablet to film them. 'Cause I thought if I just told people they wouldn't believe me. But if they saw it, they'd have to. Is that the tablet you used? He asked, pointing. She held up the cracked device with both hands. Yes, sir. Mr. Cooper took it gently and handed it to a tech guy who must have been waiting for this moment. They hooked it up to the small screen used earlier for Calvin's tidy little photos. Your Honor, Mr. Cooper said with the court's permission, we'd like to play a short recording this child made showing communications between the petitioner and the counselor, whose report has been so heavily relied upon. The judge nodded. Proceed. The lights dimmed slightly. The screen flickered to life. At first, it was just our living room, so familiar it made my chest ache. Then the camera zoomed in on Calvin's phone, lying on the table, messages pulled up. The text bubbles appeared huge on the screen. Simone judges like structure. Her being emotional works in your favor. Keep documenting. Calvin. Trust me, I am. House kid, everything will be secure once the court sees what I deal with. Simone. Once you have full custody, you'll both be free. We can talk next steps then. I heard a sharp inhale from someone behind me. The video went on, catching snippets from another day. The message about my episode over burnt food. Simone telling him all of it helps build the narrative. When it ended, the room was so quiet you could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. The judge looked different, stiffer, less patient. Dr. Brooks, he said, turning sharply toward her. Did you disclose to this court that you had been advising Mr. Harris on how to present his wife in the worst possible light for the purposes of this case? Color drained from Simone's face. I was simply offering support, she stammered. Those texts are out of context. We'll get to your context later. The judge cut her off. For now, sit down. He turned back to Nia. Is there more? Mr. Cooper asked softly. You mentioned following them to a coffee shop. Nia nodded, throat bobbing. I followed Daddy and Miss Simone, she said. I know I wasn't supposed to, but I heard him say mean things about Mommy, and I recorded that too. Another clip played, this one shaky and muffled but clear enough. Calvin's voice. Once Denise looks crazy in court, it's a done deal. With your report and the videos, the judge will hand Nia right to me. Simone's laugh. You don't feel guilty, Calvin. I'm not making her anything. I'm just showing what she already is. I felt those words like a slap all over again. On the screen, you could see them leaning toward each other, sharing a smile that had nothing to do with professional concern. When the video ended, nobody moved. Mr. Harris, the judge, said finally, voice flat, approached the bench. Calvin's attorney scrambled to whisper something to him, but the judge held up a hand. I don't want to hear from counsel right now, he said. I want to hear from the man who's been assuring this court he's acting solely in his child's best interests. Calvin walked up slowly. Some of his polish had cracked around the edges. Did you or did you not conspire with this counselor to deliberately portray your wife as unstable in order to gain full custody, the judge asked. Calvin opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I just documented what was already happening, he said weakly. She is unstable. The counselor said I asked if you conspired. The judge repeated sharper now. Yes or no? My client was following professional advice, his lawyer cut in. Clearly the counselor overstepped. Counselor, be quiet, the judge snapped. I've seen the messages. I've heard the tape. This was not neutral evaluation. This was a coordinated effort to manipulate this court. He turned back to Nia and his expression softened. Miss Harris, he said gently, why did you make those recordings? She gripped the arms of the chair. 'Cause Daddy always says Mommy's crazy, she whispered. And when Mommy says he's mean, nobody believes her. I thought, if I showed someone, then maybe they'd see. And maybe Mommy wouldn't have to cry so much. My heart broke and healed all at once right there. Thank you for your honesty, the judge said, his voice thick. You've done something very brave today. He dismissed her from the stand. She scrambled down and ran straight to me. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her shake. You did so good, I whispered into her hair. I'm so proud of you. So proud. The judge rubbed his forehead like he had a headache. This court takes a very dim view of attempts to weaponize mental health concerns and counseling against a spouse, he said slowly. What I see here is not a clear-cut case of an unstable mother and a saintly father. I see a pattern of coercive control and manipulation by Mr. Harris, abetted by a counselor who abandoned any pretense of neutrality. He shuffled papers, then looked up. As of now, he said, temporary primary physical custody of the minor child will be awarded to Ms. Harris. Mr. Harris will have supervised visitation until a full investigation is complete. The involvement of Dr. Brooks in this case is to be suspended immediately, and her conduct will be referred to the appropriate licensing board for review. Simone's hand flew to her chest. Calvin's face went slack. My daughter belongs with me, he blurted out. She belongs with both of her parents, the judge said coldly. But only one of you has stood in this courtroom today trying to show the whole truth. The other has been caught lying to this court's face. He banged his gavel. We're adjourned. The rest is a blur of movement and noise, lawyers talking, papers being gathered, people whispering. But the clearest memory I have is of stepping out of that courtroom into the sunlight with Nia's hand in mine. For the first time in a very long time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I wasn't crazy. We still had a long road ahead. The investigation dragged on for months. Calvin's visitation was tightly monitored. Simone's name disappeared from the church bulletin overnight, and there were quiet murmurs in the pews about ethics and boundaries. Calvin tried to play the victim for a while. He told anyone who'd listen that I'd turned his child against him, that the whole thing was a misunderstanding, that the videos were edited. But that tape of him laughing about making me look crazy was a stain he couldn't scrub out. A funny thing happened as the truth came out. Little pieces of reality started returning to me. I got a part-time job at a community center cooking for the senior lunch program. Turned out all those years of stretching meals and feeding a family had made me pretty good at feeding a crowd. Miss Denise, you put your foot in this mac and cheese, the old men would joke, coming back for seconds. Their compliments felt so different from Calvin's backhanded ones. They weren't tests I could fail. They were just kindness. On Sundays, I started bringing extra plates to single mothers in the neighborhood. Folks heard, and before long, my little kitchen had turned into a kind of pop-up gathering spot. Women would sit around my table eating fried chicken and collard greens and talk. I feel like I'm going crazy, one would confess. He says it's all in my head, another would say. And I'd nod because I knew that tune by heart. I'd tell them about gaslighting, about coercive control, about how dangerous it is when someone convinces you not to trust your own eyes. You ain't crazy, baby, I'd say. You just been lied to really well. We started calling those evenings Soul Food Sundays. The food filled bellies, but the talking, that filled something deeper. Years passed. Nia grew. She went from braids and beads to twist-outs and hoop earrings. She stopped asking permission to speak her mind. She still saw her father some under better boundaries, but their relationship would always be complicated. I didn't badmouth him to her. I didn't have to. She'd seen with her own eyes who he chose to be. One day when she was about 19, we sat on the porch swing together watching the sun slide down behind the trees. She was quiet, which was rare. "Penny, for your thoughts," I asked. She twisted the bracelet on her wrist. "Sometimes I feel bad," she said. "About what happened in court." I frowned. "Bad baby, you saved us." "But I recorded him without him knowing," she said. "I followed him. I told the judge things that hurt him." "What kind of daughter does that?" "The kind with a conscience," I said. "The kind who saw wrong and refused to pretend it was right." "But I betrayed him," she whispered. I shook my head. "You didn't betray your father, Nia. He betrayed you first. He betrayed all of us when he decided his need to win was more important than our safety." She blinked rapidly, eyes shining. Sometimes I wonder if I should have kept quiet. Maybe things wouldn't have blown up so bad." I turned to face her fully. "If you had kept quiet," I said softly, "do you know where we'd be? You'd probably be living in some house I never got to see with a stepmother who helped your father circle me like a wounded animal. I'd be the crazy ex they all laughed about over dinner. I'd see you on holidays if he felt generous, and you'd still be wondering why nobody believed what you saw." She swallowed. "I didn't want that. And because you spoke up, I said you don't have it." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You didn't just save me, Nia. You saved yourself. You saved the future you get to have." She leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat like that for a long time, the swing creaking gently, the past settling a little quieter inside both of us. Years after that, Nia had a daughter of her own, a little girl with big eyes and a loud, joyful laugh. The first time I held my granddaughter, I cried so hard they thought something was wrong. "Nana's just leaking," I joked, wiping my face. "Too much love in here. It's got to come out somewhere." As she grew, that baby learned early that Nana's house was a safe house. No walking on eggshells, no pretending. If you dropped your cup, we cleaned it up and kept on laughing. One afternoon not too long ago, Nia stopped by with her daughter. The little one ran straight to my kitchen asking for cookies. While she rummaged in the cookie jar, something caught her eye. "Nana, what's this?" she asked, holding up an old battered tablet with a cracked-up screen pulled from the back of a drawer. My breath caught. I'd forgotten it was in there. But of course I hadn't really forgotten. Some things you never forget. You just tuck them away where they hurt less to look at. That, I said slowly, taking it from her small hands, is a very old tablet that once held something very important. Nia looked up from the sink where she was rinsing dishes. Our eyes met and a whole story passed between us without a word. "Is it like treasure?" my granddaughter asked, eyes wide. "In a way," I said. "You go play in the living room, baby. Grown folks gotta talk for a minute." When she scampered off trailing crumbs, I sat at the table and ran my fingers over the cracked glass. Nia pulled out the chair across from me. "You kept it," she said softly. "Of course I did," I replied. "This little thing changed our whole lives." She reached out and touched it too. "I haven't watched those videos in years," she murmured. "I don't want to." "Me either," I said. "I don't need to. I remember enough." We were quiet a moment, the weight of all that history sitting between us in the form of a cheap old piece of electronics. "Do you ever feel angry still?" she asked. At him, at Simone, at everybody who believed them. Sometimes, I admitted. Anger comes in waves, but it don't drown me like it used to. You know why? She shook her head. "Because we didn't just win a case," I said. "We took our minds back. We took back the right to say, I know what I saw, I know what I felt, and I don't need anyone else to tell me if it was real." She smiled a little. "I still second-guess myself sometimes," she said. "Wonder if I'm overreacting, if I'm being too sensitive." "Welcome to being a woman raised by a gaslighter," I said wryly. We all got that voice in our head. But now when that voice pops up, I picture that judge's face when he saw the truth for himself. I picture that little girl you used to be walking up to that stand with her head high even though her knees were shaking. Nia blinked. "I was so scared," she whispered. "And you did it anyway," I said. "That's what bravery is. Not being scared, doing the right thing while you're scared." We sat there a while longer, then she laughed softly. "What?" I asked. I just realized something she said. "My daughter's never going to know that version of you, the one who apologized for everything, the one who walked on eggshells in her own house." "Good," I said. I wouldn't introduce that woman to her if you paid me. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm glad that woman's gone, she said. I like this one better. I smiled, feeling tears prick my eyes. Me too, baby, I said. Me too. Later that night, after they'd gone home and the house was quiet again, I sat in my old armchair with a cup of tea and thought about all the women who might be sitting in their own chairs in their own quiet houses wondering if they're the crazy one. If that's you, I want you to hear me. You're not crazy because you're tired. You're not unstable because you cry. You're not unfit because your house doesn't look like a magazine spread every moment of the day. You're not less deserving of love because someone else keeps moving the finish line and telling you you're always coming in last. Sometimes the very people calling you unstable are the ones shaking the ground under your feet. I spent years believing whatever my husband told me about myself. It took a little girl with braids and a cracked old tablet to show me what was really true. People say time heals all wounds. Maybe sometimes it does. But in my case, healing started on a single afternoon in a cold courtroom when my 10-year-old daughter stood up, walked to the front, and pressed play on the truth. Since then, I've learned that no matter how loud a lie gets, truth has a sound all its own. It might come out shaky at first. It might come out through a child's voice instead of your own. But once it's spoken, once it's shown, it has a way of rearranging everything around it. So if you're sitting there doubting your own eyes, your own memory, your own worth, this old woman in her little kitchen with her grandbaby's toys on the floor and her pots on the stove is here to tell you, you're not crazy. You're not alone. And somewhere inside you, there's a voice that knows what's real. One day when you're ready, you'll let that voice press play.